Hello, this is a note about creating and evaluating pathways in qtVlm. And I'm going to just do this one very generically. In fact, here I'm out in the ocean, the North Pacific, doing this. And later we'll come back and actually make real pathways inside on charted land, charted areas, and ways to test the safety of them and so forth. And those options will come up. But first of all, let me clean up here a little bit. I wanted to show, here's a trick. I got the shift key down and I'm drawing this box. I was practicing here. I drew that box with a shift key and drag it and then delete all marks. Yes, that's a nice trick to recall, because when you delete a pathway, it deletes the pathway but leaves the marks. And those were marks I was playing with in making some notes for this talk. So first of all, what is a pathway? It is just a series of waypoints, that have an order to them, a sequence to them, and they have a name. And then once that's made, then we can look at that pathway and compute the range and bearing between each of those waypoints and modify it and do other things. And in fact, I'll show you we can add a speed and a starting time and get ETAs. But the significance is that the pathway itself has no propulsion method assumed. We're just making this path through the waterway, and I should mention that in a lot of programs, that concept of what we're talking about here, pathway of just waypoints and sequential waypoints, is often called a route. But in qtVlm, the program distinguishes the terms pathway, route, and routing. Now, a route is then when we take a given pathway and assign some means of propulsion. For example, sailboat. So if it's a sailboat going along a pathway, to make it into a route, then we have to have a polar diagram that tells us how the boat performs, and we have to have a wind forecast. In principle, we need to know the currents, the waves, things like that. So that's a route. That's the way we do routes. And then a routing is the next level, where you're actually using the forecast, not the existing wind and environmental data, but you're using a forecast and then doing isochronal computations of the optimum route. So we got a pathway, route, and routings. And here we're just talking about a pathway. This pathway, like I say, can later be converted to a route, or you can run a routing based on a pathway. All right, let's start. So there's a couple ways you can do it. One way, and we start out here, pathway, create a pathway. So let's look at what our options are. First of all, we give it a name, and then this is just test one. That's our pathway. And then you can change the line between the points. You can change the color of it, and you can change the size of it. And then the pathway start time. This does not matter at this stage, because we're not doing anything with ETAs or anything. But eventually, if we want ETAs and some kind of estimated speed along that, notice we're talking speed, as speed made good, point to point. We're not talking about how does it get there. It's just assuming somehow you know that. That could be sailboat, powerboat, swimming, whatever. Okay, so then the pathway starting point, and if you're underway, you're going to be doing almost everything from the boat and real navigation. But with the training and so forth, it's usually you're going to start from the first mark. So when you create a pathway, then probably you would check the first one. Start from first mark. Now, this is a very sophisticated, beautiful option that is included in qtVlm, but we're not getting into that now. That's when we have to come back in the second video. We're going to go into charts, and on the charts there's going to be rocks and obstructions and hazards and shoalings and things like that. And this is a automated way to have the program test to see that you're not getting in any trouble. But we come back to that later. And what are her options? Close, reverse. These are all things done more or less when we have the pathway already done. This we'll address in a moment, but the default should probably just always be POIs by sequence number. This can get a little tricky. We usually want to avoid that, but I am going to illustrate what's going on with that in a moment. So we want POIs by sequence number. And then, so let's start the simplest way. We're going to create the waypoints on the wing as we need them. The waypoint, or here it's called POI, point of interest. So after you've made those choices here, well, it's just that, then you click append POIs. And now we do, here's a waypoint 1, then we want to go here, then we want to go here, then here, here, and here. Okay, so there now, and you notice what's happened. This has appeared up here, and you can push. That means you're trying to drive off the chart over here. You can then push this button here, and it'll move things over for you like that. Or you can just use the arrow keys or something like that. But if you click this and try to drag the chart, it'll drop a waypoint. Anyway, we're done. And once you're done, then you can hit stop, append POI, click this button, or just hit the escape key. And now you're done. And so you see how it has named it. It has, now we can go in and indeed on a real routing, real navigation, you're going to want these waypoints along these marks along the path to have a real significant name. And so we would name this like 01 Blakely Rock, 02 Jones Cove, and things like that. So they always have a real number and a real name. That's later. Okay, so, but you can go in, and how you would do that, you could just right-click this and say Edit, and now we're editing that particular waypoint, that POI, and then that's here, and you could put, you could name it however you like. Notice that these marks, now this is a little bit off the topic a little bit, these marks that we have here along the pathway, is they could be in different categories. They could be a POI, a mark, or a beacon. Now that's not really too significant. It doesn't matter at all, frankly, but that's a way that you can distinguish between the color and the size of the marks. In other words, you can have all POI be yellow and a certain size, all marks be red and bigger. These are green and so forth. But that's just for personal use. For most practical applications, it really doesn't matter. Unless for some reason you need these bigger than they see these little tiny dots, then that's there. The other thing to keep in mind, too, when working with these is you see okay, I'm done. That's just changing the name. And then we're not doing anything else with that for the moment. Okay, but if I touch this, I'm left clicking it. You see it's at a blue circle, and I can move it. I can move it like that. But that's because back here in configuration appearance, I've set this to allow POIs to be moved immediately. If you turn that off, and then you go to a POI, you see when you first click it, it's red, and you can't move it. So you may want to have, but you see after, you click it and it's red, you can't move it. Then after some period of time, or maybe the second click, then you can move it. But for this and for a lot of work, I would say turn that on so you can move them immediately. That's probably a little bit faster, because when you're actually designing a pathway that you're going to follow in some way, you want to just grab these things. When we go in and start looking at them, going around corners and in between channels and rocks, you want to move them so you could have that be flexible like that, so you can move them around. Okay, insert, see how, okay. So we can also go in here, like you can right-click. I'm right here. Say I decided that there's a bump here I want to go around, and I don't have enough waypoints here. I can go in and click this and say add a POI. So you see it added one, and it will take the previous one and add a 1 to it like that. So that's how you insert that, and you can move them, and you can rename them. I've done that. Okay, so now then that's a pathway. That's a pathway. And now let's edit this. We go, when you roll your mouse over, your cursor over it, see when it's highlighted, you can right-click it when it's highlighted and say Edit Pathway Test 1. And so here's the stuff that the setting we did. But now this important point here, information and management. Now you click that. Now we see the information about it. So here's the total distance of the whole pathway, and so forth. And here you can, if you want, you could, oh, there's a 401 here. I can go here, for example, and click this one. Oh, let me back up a minute. Let me just go out here and say, here's 3. Let me just go up here and put a new mark and just say doodah. Okay, so that's a mark up there called doodah. All right, so I'm now looking at this pathway, edit, and I'm information. And now at 3, I want to add a waypoint after that. So then I go up here to do, oh, okay, so here's another thing. Let's see, do I see doodah here anywhere? Doodah, D, small d. Oh, I wonder if these are not alpha. Well, anyway, here's the waypoint. I don't know if it's alphabetical. We have to look. In some cases, it's alphabetical. Sometimes it's just a sequence that something has been added. And then sometimes also more subtle still, they can be alphabetized, but then they alphabetize by capital letters first and then small letters. So there's 3 ways apparently that long lists of waypoints can show up. Okay, so doodah is the one I want, and say okay. Now I have to be sure to say okay here. And then you see what happened, that it inserted that this way. Now, there's other ways you do it. As I mentioned before, you can just right-click, do it, and drag it where you want it. All right, let's go back here, edit this, management. Now, and so this is all these points, but there's no speed and there's no ETAs because we haven't imagined yet any starting time or any. But if you're planning a voyage, and let's say you assume you're going to be under power, then under power, you can maybe figure some estimated speed made good, or if you're going to be reaching or something. But let's say you're under power. So that means we take a starting point. Let's just say okay, and go back to the route, the pathway, and then just give it a starting time, fixed date, and let's just say this. It doesn't matter. This could be now, in the future, or in the past. And let's say it's 12 noon. Okay, high noon on some. And this is going to be whatever time system we have set, right? It's going to be the same time system you have set up here in the configuration units. We are doing UTC, or you could do local time. Okay, this happens to be UTC. All right, so now I've got a starting time. Edit, and so this is, you would use that time if you're planning ahead. Let's say it's now, and in July I'm going to plan a trip, and I just want to kind of knock out what I think the rough DR would be, estimated trip time over there. So what's this? That's not what I want. Oh, no, that's okay. I'm there, edit a pathway, go to here. Now I have a start time, but I still don't have anything. And that's because my speed's 0, so I'm not moving. So let's just say on my first leg, I'm going to go out of there at 6 knots. Okay, so now I'm off. So I'm starting out, and I don't know if a sail, power, or paddleboard, well, fast paddleboard, good current. So I'm going, it's going to take 2 days and 6 hours to get to the next waypoint, from 1 to 2. And again, these are real awkward names. When you're making your own pathway, you would give these logical names, starting out with a number, like 01, that, 02, that, and so forth. And then I go to the next leg. Let's say I got the current against me. I'm only going 4 knots. Then you got that, and so forth. So then you can do that, and you get an ETA at each of the points. The other thing I forgot, let me say okay here and come back. I think there's another control here. Information management. Yeah, you can take like this waypoint here and move it up. You see, where are we? Which one is that? That's 5. 5. And I'll just move it up 1, and I can do here. So now, okay. So then, Oh, I don't. Well, okay. I didn't see that move, but generally it just changes the order. It should just change that order. 5. I didn't do it. See, here's 5, and I move it up. Yeah, 5 now comes right after 3, and I say okay. And okay, yeah. See, doodah comes right after that. All right. So you can do those kind of manipulations. All right, so that's that. The other thing you can do is here. Oh, no, not here. It would be, okay, let's say you have this nice pathway designed, and you want to save it. Save it. Now, that's saving it here. Routes, pathway, edit pathway, export pathway, export pathway. So here, this is test 1. You export that, and then that will go off into your folder somewhere, and then you can save it. It'll be a function called it'll be .qpar, I think, something like that, .qpar. And that's a file that will then be a total record of this, and then you can save that somewhere, and then either delete it or load it back in later on. Okay, so that's that on the path. The next thing I want to show is there's another way to make a pathway. I can just say, let me just say, and that's from existing waypoints. Like here, I made some waypoints: Jones Rock, Apple Cove, Big Diamond, whatever. These are waypoints. So now I would go to pathway, create a pathway, and let's call this test 2 from existing or whatever, existing. Okay, so that's right. This doesn't matter. Again, the date doesn't matter. But from the first mark will matter, and that's all of that. Okay. But now, okay, so now, oh no, I didn't. I forgot to hit the button, append path. Okay, pathway. Now I did something wrong. I quit that window before I said append the waypoints, right? So I have to go back and say edit the pathway. I'd like to think I made that mistake on purpose, sort of. Okay, now I'm back here. Now I have to hit append pathway, POIs, point of interest. Now I can start. Now what you would do then is you just can go here and click this one. Now, the first click of that doesn't do anything, right? You just have to know that it's going to happen the next time. Now if I click here, now it knows that's my second one, that's my third one, that's my fourth, that's my fifth. Okay, so there's and then back here, stop or hit escape. So there is now the pathway that I made based on existing routes. And all the other features and so forth behave the same way. I can add this waypoint to it if I want to later. I could just go in here, edit pathway. Let's see. How did I do that now? Okay, I guess it was, I could say after Apple Cove, I do plus, and then what's the one? I think I called it Forget Me or something like that. Forgot me. Okay, okay here, and then okay here. Okay, so you see then it inserted that guy in there. Okay, fine. Now, let me just show one other thing. Now, look, these waypoints, marks, POIs, let me tidy that up. In the program, there are 3 kinds of marks. There's what they call mark, POI, or beacon. But they're all generically POI, point of interest. Now, the phrase waypoint, that's a really common. It's used all over everywhere, and that's, in a sense, once you start navigating to one of these points, or if one of these marks, POIs, is part of a pathway or a route or something like that, then it becomes more generically called a waypoint. But if you just have a mark out here, it's not necessarily a waypoint. But these are, in a sense, waypoints along this pathway. Okay, the thing I wanted to show is if you go in here now and say edit the pathway, and then if I change, but these, see, even though these aren't numbered, they got sequenced by the order of which I clicked them into the system. But if I change to alphabetical order, then it's going to be kind of like gobbledygook, because it's going to literally go from, where is it going to start? Apple Cove, that's an A, Big Diamond, Jones, Forget Me, Last, and so forth. Oh, it goes from last to zebra. Okay, so, and then, but it has remembered the sequence, so that's, you can do that. But still, when you're making these pathways in your own navigation, you definitely want to give them a logical name. And that will become clear in the next video we do on practical pathways in real charts, and then we check the safety of them and some other nuances, but it's mostly navigational nuances that we discuss next. This is just the background of creating these pathways within the program qtVlm. Thank you.